My disclaimer. My videos don't necessarily promote one religion. My views and opinions aren't meant to change the minds, opinions, or beliefs of others. Watch with an open mind. Disclaimer. Copyright. Disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use, for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, entertainment, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. All rights and credit go directly to its rightful owners. No copyright infringement is intended. We continue to uncover the profound wisdom within the timeless scriptures. Take care, and God bless. Welcome to today's video, where we explore a powerful story of faith, courage, and God's deliverance in the midst of fire. Our story takes us back to ancient Babylon during the time of the exile, where three young men found themselves in the middle of a life-threatening ordeal. Outline 1. The three friends trust in the Lord and refuse to give in. 16-18. 2. Nebuchadnezzar is enraged. 19-23. 3. The Lord protects them from the fire. 24-27. 4. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges the Lord and blesses the three men. 28-30. Our story begins with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, three faithful Jewish friends who refused to bow down to a golden statue erected by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Enraged by their disobedience, the king ordered these brave young men to be thrown into a furnace, heating it 7 times hotter than ever before. Shadrach, our God is able to deliver us from this blazing fire. Meshach, even if he chooses not to, we will not worship your gods or bow down to your image. Abednego, we trust in the Lord, our God alone. Nebuchadnezzar's anger intensified, and he commanded his strongest soldiers to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the fiery furnace. As the three men were cast into the furnace, an incredible sight unfolded. The heat was so intense that it consumed the soldiers who threw them in. But to everyone's astonishment, inside the furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were walking unharmed. And what's more, they were not alone. Nebuchadnezzar, witnessing this miracle, called the young men to come out of the furnace. As they emerged, their bodies untouched by the fire, the king recognized the power of their God. He praised the Lord and declared their God as the one true God, the deliverer in the midst of fire. Nebuchadnezzar, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants. No other God can save in this way. This incredible story teaches us valuable lessons about faith, courage, and the unwavering power of God. Just as he delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the fire, he can deliver us from any trial, challenge, or adversity we face today. Verse 16-18. 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. 17. If it be so, Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. 18. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Discussion. Questions. Did the Jews consider giving in? Why not? What enabled them to stand firm, even in the face of faith? Were they willing to give their lives for it, or did they just expect God to save them? What should this teach us about the motivation to do right? Matthew 10:19-20. When they deliver you over, do not be anxious how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Psalms 27:1-2. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Isaiah 12:2. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and will not be afraid, for the Lord God is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. Luke 1:37. For nothing will be impossible with God. Verse by verse. Commentary. Daniel 3:16-18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. This is one of the most remarkable declarations of faith you will ever see. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's declaration of faith. They didn't even consider giving in. It was never an option. Their determination was clearly conveyed to the king. Like Daniel in chapter 1, the communication was clear and respectful. There isn't a hint of rudeness or arrogance. Nonetheless, their resolve was firm. Application: when the battle lines are drawn, it is essential to declare your position. The longer you allow a temptation to linger in your mind without taking decisive action, the more likely you will succumb to it. Have the correct principles and make up your mind ahead of time to stand firm. Don't negotiate. There is no negotiation on God's clear commands. Once you start negotiating, you've already lost the battle. Eve. 2. We have no need to answer you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were accountable to God. They clearly understood that God was the judge. He is the one on the throne, and he is the one to whom they answered. Although Nebuchadnezzar thought that he was the supreme ruler over all, there is one still higher still. Application: understand that each of us is ultimately accountable to God. Many people may seek to set themselves up as the authority over us, and God does establish authority structures. The problem is, when people make themselves out to be the ultimate authority, whether that is a government, a boss, or even parents seeking to control grown children. Remembering that God is the one you need to answer to simplifies our decisions and crystallizes what is important. 3. We will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up. Like Daniel in chapter 1, the three friends decided they were not going to cross this line. It wasn't a negotiation. Threats to their life would make no difference. Their determination was firm. Seeing the clarity of their thoughts and speed of reply, they likely discussed their response to the image before the day of dedication even arrived. Their minds were already made up. These young men had counted the costs, and there was no turning back. Application: it is critical to resolve in your mind not to compromise before you ever face a potentially compromising situation. For example, sex before marriage should be a red line for believers. Don't wait to make that decision in the heat of the moment. You should make this commitment before God long before you ever face that moment of opportunity, just temptation. 4. They were willing to give their lives for it. They knew God could save them, but even if He didn't, they would still stand firm in the faith. They weren't like all of the others, merely pragmatically motivated. It wasn't about what they could get, it was about what was right. Some professing believers are willing to obey God as long as God blesses them and rewards them. But when trouble comes, they just give up. It's not worth it to them. Let us follow the example of these three faithful men by committing ourselves to stand firm on the rock, even if it costs us something or everything. 5. Their faith was deep. They had a rock-solid faith in the Lord and in His power, knowing He was in control. Acknowledging before God that the people around us who exercise authority are themselves under His is half the battle. Our teacher, parents, boss, and friends may seem powerful now, but they won't once we face the Lord. Our primary responsibility is to serve the Lord, not men. 6. What is humility? Daniel's friends were humble. They did not think overly highly of themselves or their own lives. Rather, they realized that God may or may not save them. These three young men saw themselves as God did. While they were valuable in His sight, their lives were less important than God's divine plan. Humility is not equal to weakness or groveling. The band spoke boldly and clearly. Having a backbone, the trio stood up straight and refused to bow. Many think that believers are weak or timid. We see that is not the case. Boldness and humility are complementary, not mutually exclusive. Knowing that your life is in God's hands and He is completely sovereign, humility gives boldness. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Discussion. Questions. Did Nebuchadnezzar respect their decision? Do you think people in the world will respect our decision if we stand up for what is right? How would you describe Nebuchadnezzar and his attitude here? Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face changed. The mighty ruler thought that he exercised total control over all of his subjects. Finding out that they had minds and a will of their own enraged him. Nebuchadnezzar almost popped a vein, he was so angry. Here is a man who was used to absolute power. Most likely, no one had ever defied him before. Throughout the events of the book of Daniel, we see that God wanted to teach Nebuchadnezzar a healthy dose of humility. 2. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more. The trio was about to discover it wasn't a false threat. Wisdom can sometimes help God's people avoid this type of showdown. For example, Daniel's wisdom helped him find another solution to the pagan food problem. But sometimes these things cannot be worked out. Sometimes there is no recourse but to boldly take a stand and let the chips fall where they may. 3. Nebuchadnezzar caused the death of the people who were serving him. Daniel 3:22. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Foolish decisions are always harmful, but they cause even more harm when those in authority make them, because their poor choices negatively affect many under them. 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. 25. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. 27. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Lorem ipsum. Discussion. Questions. Who do you think was walking around in the fire with them? Why? How complete was the miracle? Cross-references: Hebrews 10:11-34. Quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Daniel 3:24-25. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said to the king, True, O king. He answered and said, But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. 1. The Lord himself was with them in the flames. A 4th person was seen walking around amid the fire. This could have been an angel, but more likely was Jesus pre-incarnate. Isaiah 43:2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. God did not abandon his faithful followers. Neither did he allow them to succumb to the pain or death of the fire. When we have faith in God, he will honor that. Regardless of what we face, he will be with us in the midst of it. The 3 friends rightly said that God might not save them. He doesn't promise to save us from every trouble. The account of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is also not a promise that God will always deliver us out of trials. Many believers have been martyred. Many prophets in the Old Testament were persecuted or killed because of their message. God's Son himself was not saved, but was delivered over to death. What God does promise is that he will do according to what is best in each situation. Romans 8:28. Another promise is that he will be with us and never abandon us. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your life free from love of money and be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Reflect. How does God show his comforting presence to believers in the midst of trials? How have you personally experienced that? 2. Those who defy God are setting themselves up for defeat. Pride goes before the fall. James 4:6. But he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. 3. God's miracles are not done halfway. There could be no doubt about the miraculous nature of this event because of the evidence of the clothes, hair, and rope. No part of them or their clothing gave any indication that they had been even near a fire. And let us not forget that the soldiers who threw them in, and clearly would have tried to stay as far from the fire as possible, were themselves killed by the extreme heat. The fire burned the ropes binding them and didn't touch the rest. God's miracles leave no room for coincidences. He wanted everyone who saw this miracle to know clearly that he was behind it. They got the message. verse 28 to 30. 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, that every people, nation, and language, which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. 30. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Discussion questions. Then 1. Is this the point where Nebuchadnezzar becomes a believer? 2. Does he respect their decision now? 3. Do you think God will save us as well? Sport. How did God use this event in the kingdom of Babylon? Sluk. How about in the lives of the 3 Jews? Drag. What do you think they learned from this event? Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged the Lord to some extent. Although he acknowledged God, he only recognized the Lord as one impressive God among many gods. He wasn't repentant, and his story is not yet over. 2. God had a plan for the whole kingdom. The decision of the 3 to stand up for their faith made life easier for the rest of the believers scattered across the kingdom. A decree was given that prohibited anyone from even speaking against their God. Their obedience turned an evil day that looked like defeat for God's followers into an amazing testimony. All over the kingdom, people heard this incredible story of God's power. And it wasn't only spread through word of mouth, but also through official decree direct from the throne. If the 3 exiles had compromised like everyone else, the result would have been a terrible lost opportunity for building God's kingdom. Our right decisions can help others. Sometimes it just takes one person standing up for truth to bring exposure to bad policies, shame to evil practices, and be a catalyst for change. If everyone goes with the status quo, nothing will change. But through the faithful, God can bring change. Stories of God's people standing up for what is right can spread the faith, inspire millions worldwide, and ultimately bring glory to God. 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were promoted. What once again looked like not only a career killer, but a life killer ended up being a career booster. The faithful trio prospered more than ever before and were set above many of those who bowed down to this idol. Nebuchadnezzar may have thought he had ultimate power, but God was holding the strings. Application. Spend some time in reflection. Choose one area where you feel pressure and is hard for you to take a stand. Ask God to show you what you need to do. Pray for strength, and resolve to stand firm. Thank you for joining us today as we explored God's deliverance in the midst of fire. May this story inspire you to trust in God's unchanging power and seek His deliverance in all circumstances.